Good evening. Herzlich willkommen. Ich kann Deutsch sprechen. Herzlich willkommen im Namen des
Hi, good evening. Welcome on behalf of How Hebel am Ufer to our first edition of our lecture series on violence that we have been organizing together with Akademie der Künste der Welt. I want to start with our first event where we referenced Elsa Dorlin. We had another event about the subjectivism of violence in neoliberalism, and then we had a talk about war and capital with Maurizio Lazzarato, and today we will center on one question or one issue, which is violence and state violence and the monopoly of violence that our state holds. We know that it's a problem that abolitionist movement and theorists have been addressing this topic for a long time. And we know that these movements have taught us that this type of violence should be abandoned because it imposes a threat to our society. Today we want to welcome Daniel Loick and Vanessa E. Thompson, who are part of the abolitionist movement. And we also have activists that are actually working against this system here on stage with us. Vanessa E. Thompson and Daniel Loick have published Abolitionism at Suhrkamp. It's a collection of texts about abolitionism. So we took a look at this collection of texts, and we decided that we wanted to invite Loick and Thompson. They have written a lot of very interesting texts. I want to welcome you or invite you to also read these texts online. And last week we had them with us here in order to talk about abolitionism. And Daniel is here with us today, and he will facilitate this event today. So he's a left comrade. We know each other from different protests. He's also an activist and has been working on the topics abolitionism, police, and police violence for a long time. I recall, or I remember, one protest in Frankfurt where we met, but today we'd rather focus on his work. So he has published a lot about state violence, about the monopoly of violence and police violence. He's based in Frankfurt, and he's kind of a hero because he came straight from Amsterdam today. So he spent 11 hours on the train in order to be with us today. We had to wait a little bit for him. However, we're happy that he has arrived. So thank you for being with us, Daniel, and thank you to our other guests for being with us as well.
Also von mir erstmal Entschuldigung für die Verspätung, dass wir so spät
So first of all, I want to say sorry for arriving so late. I really planned to have a delay of 4 hours, and in the end it turned out to be more than 4 hours, but I'm happy to be with all of you today. Thank you to Margarita for inviting me. Thank you to the How Theater for inviting me. As I said before, or as was already said, we have structured this event today, and it's going to be made of 2 parts. The first part is about violence, and the second about counter-violence. We will try to explain which different types of violence and state power we are experiencing here in Germany. Violence that is translated into racism, for example, or Just take a look at the first 4 weeks of August, where 4 people alone have been shot dead by the police. So what we try to do in our work is to put these events, these individual events, into a greater context. First, I want to say something about abolitionism. The term abolitionism means, or if you're an abolitionist, you are actually fighting for a liberation from enslavement in the Americas in the 19th century. This is where this term originated. However, there's a very long story about this term, because it was also used in indigenous movements about or against state violence and state power. It was used against police violence, mass incarcerations. This is probably the context that made the term abolitionism most popular. And during the last years, the Black Lives Matter movement has drawn on this concept and has used this concept of abolitionism a lot as well. And that's how this term got popular. So Vanessa and I thought that this term was actually a good term to include in these lecture series, because we really want to ask, what is an abolitionist practice made of? What can we learn from abolitionism about violence, and what types of counter-violence are there? So abolitionism is a theoretical approach, but it's also a practical approach that is different to other movements in the following terms. First of all, it is intersectional. It is always about putting different forms of violence into a greater context and how they intersect with different categories. So this means putting racism, sexuality, capitalism, and also racial capitalism into a relation to each other. And this is how we also want to address violence from different perspectives. Abolitionism has always been an international movement. So already in the 19th century, there were kind of connecting lines between different countries and movements. So this movement was or existed in the US, but also in Europe. And women in exile have been demanding the abolition of the so-called lager, of the refugee camps, for a long time. So we also want to address these topics, because if we talk about violence today, we need to talk about violence on a global scale. And we need to also take a look at different types of counter actions. And the third thing that we need to know about abolitionism is that it is really also about practice. Often you hear abolitionism is an academic issue, is an academic topic. However, I think, or I want to argument that abolitionism is really based on social movements. And this is also the reason why Vanessa and I did not want to hold these lecture series alone, but we rather wanted to invite activists and people from different parts of Europe, but also other parts of the world, who really put abolitionism into practice. We want to know about their perspectives and how they approach the topic of violence. I want to briefly explain why Vanessa isn't here with us today. First of all, she is in Canada right now. And secondly, it's her birthday today. So Vanessa, if you're watching, happy birthday.
Aber wie gesagt, Ihren Beitrag
but as I just said, you can watch her input online later. So let me first briefly introduce our guests and the initiatives that they represent. I think they will give us a little bit more detail about their work later on. But yeah, let me just start. I start with the oldest existing group here in this round. I'm going to start with Women in Exile. It's initiative by women with a refugee experience that was founded in 2002 in Brandenburg. They have all experienced racism and sexism and have been calling out this double discrimination for a long time. So they have called for an abandonment or for abandoning the system of refugee camps, and they fight against racist discrimination of women and refugee women in general. So the second group that has already existed for a long time is CopWatch. It was founded in Frankfurt in 2013, and it wants to provide assistance and legal assistance and support to victims of racist police violence. They have a hotline that you can call if you are a victim of racist police violence or if you have witnessed racist police violence. So it's an information and documentation center for victims of racist police violence. Thank you for being with us today, CopWatch FFM. Then, next group that we have with us today is the campaign Ihr seid keine Sicherheit, which means you do not protect us. It's an alliance of different groups and organizations, and the title or their name already tells us what this group is about. It's really about rejecting police violence and think of other concepts that can provide safety within our society. So this campaign or alliance is based in Berlin, and we're also happy to have you with us here today. And then we have
vertretenen Kampagnen eine europaweite Kampagne, die ein dezentrales Netzwerk darstellt. Eigentlich auch da sagt
Abolish Frontex. It's a decentralized and autonomous network of groups, organizations, and individuals. And Abolish Frontex is not about reforming or improving Frontex or to replace it with another similar system, but it's really about targeting the policies and the system that keeps Frontex in place. So what we will do today is discussing different topics, and we will divide the event into two parts. The first round is about violence. What is violence? And the second part is about counter-violence, or how can we address violence. So we have the inputs from our different organizations, and after hearing about their perspectives, we will open the discussion and take questions from the audience. So let me start by asking the first question. What is violence? Last week I was in Dortmund. I joined a protest that addressed the police who murdered Mohamed Ali. Maybe you've heard of it. What was a 16-year-old Senegalese young man with a refugee background. He was killed by the police in Dortmund. And I think this example shows the different layers of state violence that we're facing. So on one hand, we have this really explicit violence, mortal violence, that can really lead to death. But then we have different forms of violence that are similar So we're talking about the violence of having to flee a country that Muhammad experienced, the violence of the border regime, colonial violence, but also the neglection of help in a situation of psychological stress. So he didn't have anyone that he could go to or ask for help, and Muhammad Rani is just one of many people who have been killed by the police in Germany during the last years. And this is something that abolitionist academics are stressing the whole time. We cannot just focus on these explicit and direct forms of violence that are seen in form of these deaths, but we have to put them into relation with other types of violence that kind of lead to this explicit violence. So Angela Davis and Ruth Wilson Gilmore pose this question all the time: how is it, or how come we accept the fact that people are put into cages, are locked into cages? And we can only answer this question by saying that we have gotten used to this type of violence. And I want to mention the first term that was coined by Ruth Wilson Gilmore. She has coined the term organized abandonment. So this does not only include repression, violence, explicit violence like a gun or pepper spray or jails, but it's also abandonment, meaning actively abandoning specific groups of our society, psychological destruction, economical destruction, exclusion. All of these things are different forms of violence as well. And I think that a lot of terms have been coined by leftist movements. For example, the term structural violence, or most recently also the term ecological criticism, and the term of slow violence. So right now I'm interested in hearing the input of our guests. I would like you to present your work. What is it that you do as a group? What type of campaigns do you have? What types of violence are you addressing or are you experiencing yourself? And also I want to ask you, really from your perspective, what is violence to you? I don't know who wants to start. Maybe we start with the youngest person on this panel.
Youngest? No. Yeah, so my name is Muhammad Al-Kashif, known as Kashif. I'm a human rights lawyer, researcher, and advocate. I'm a member of Abolish Frontex, and my main focus on the border regime and struggle at the borders crossing. Yeah, part of the, let's say, the Mediterranean movement since 2012 actually started from the other side, from Egypt, when we witnessed the Syrian and Sudanese trying to cross to Europe. With Abolish Frontex, actually we are kind of denouncing and tracing the work of Frontex. And Frontex, for the people that they don't know it, it's the European Agency for Border Security. So this is the agency who is responsible, and it's a European one. This is responsible for implementing the migration policies, to implementing the agenda of migration management that pushed by EU and member states. We started already 2 years ago to have Abolish Frontex. It started as a campaign. Now it's a network of many groups around the Mediterranean, especially in Europe. Here we work in different activism forms, I would say. documentation, we do action days, we go for protest, we raise awareness, we get engaged in events like this to spread the knowledge. We also involved in the knowledge production process, working in collaboration with other movements. I like to call it a resistance movement. And the violence, just to go faster, the violence that we witness and what we see is the violence at the borders. And it's different forms of violence. It's not just a physical form of violence, it's also psychological violence. And it consists a lot of racism, classism, and paternalism. It's not just this border security officers run after refugees or people in the move crossing the borders to arrest them and deport them, to torture them, but also the behavior and how they treating people, I would say, worse than animals. Like they are not human beings. And that's something that we are witness and observe every day at sea, in the land, wherever inside the Schengen zone, outside. We also witness that in the externalized border, because Europe now has this concept of border externalization. So they pushed the European borders outside Europe. It's now in the Middle East, in the central of Africa, in West Africa, in West Asia. And we also document such violence at the borders. And Frontex is involved. Why Frontex? Because Frontex is involved. Frontex nowadays, it's not just this agency. No, it's going to make deals, agreements, and even memorandums with countries, not just European countries, but non-European countries. And it's playing a big role in this border regime thing. So that's why we wanted to abolish it, not to reform it, not even to replace it with something similar, because we see the problem is the migration policies and how the policymakers in EU, in Brussels, or in any European capital, put in these policies and from this white supremacy level and seeing the whole world have to follow, and how they teach the world the modern morals, and the brainwashing happening in the media when it comes to this. What we see in the media, just this victims or refugees trying to cross, criminals trying to steal the piece of cake that we are having here in this civil world. But we don't actually see in the media the criticism of these policies who bring and impact all what we are living today. I will stop here. Thank you.
Ja. Ja, vielen Dank für den Einblick in eure wichtige Arbeit.
Thank you for sharing your work. For sharing what you do. You mentioned a couple of terms, the relationship between racist violence and what precedes it, which is the dehumanization of people that you described, that you are able in the first place to perpetrate that violence, and the difference between legal violence and extra-legal violence. The fact that we don't know that Frontex is actually an executing organ, an executing power, or is it an independent agency that does something completely different than what the states want? And we'll come back to that, I believe, later on. But now let me give the floor to the second youngest group here on stage. Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm from the second youngest group. It is Ihr seid keine Sicherheit. We are an abolitionist group. You do not protect us. We are from Berlin, and of course our goal is to abolish all security organs of the state and the police as well. So what is our notion of violence? We are the second youngest group on stage, but we are still fairly young, and we have not yet come up with a definition for us, but in a very interesting work that resonated with us and that are interesting also in relation to what forms of violence we are working on and we are trying to address and fight against. Of course, in the end, we want to abolish the police and other state security forces and criminal justice institutions. For us, what does it mean? We have to shift our understanding of the notion of safety. What is it what makes us safe? Of course, not the highly militarized robocops. What helps is social housing, and housing that is affordable for all and accessible for all. We want everyone to feel safe, have access to decent work, to education, and so on. Our anniversary is the 8th of May 2021, as you have said. This is when we first organized a large event. It was a demonstration against police violence and Nazis in the justice, criminal justice authorities and the state security apparatus. It was really interesting to see that there's so much support, we have so much backing, so many groups are working on this issue of police violence. This is a really interesting development. We put out a call, 80 civil society organizations really quickly came on board, and 8,000 people took to the street on this demonstration. And we had different blocks, of course. There was one block addressing racial profiling and racist police violence. There was another block on about violence against the homeless, police who are evicting the camps, and so on. But there was also another block in this demonstration thematizing criminalization of left movements. So this excessive police violence, to be exposed to this to have this experience, and this is an experience that is shared by many marginalized groups, and it is also an experience of people who are fighting against these relations of violence, such as me. Kritik der Polizei, written a book by Daniel, Critique of Police. Our central experience is that this is a shared experience, right? So we started out as a campaign. Now we are more of a political group, I'd say, and we see that I was a member of Initiative Schwarze Menschen in Deutschland, the ISD, and there is, it seems to me, a critical mass that is really critical of police as a system and as an institution. So, according to studies, to surveys that we did, a third of those who responded in our survey, they really see police really critical. You see videos on social media where only humans, you are insulting me, you're spitting at me, but actually I am fighting for your safety. And this shows us that in society there seems to be almost a critical mass that really is critical of the police. So our conviction is, even though we had no bad apples in the police, but we still would have some who would perpetrate violence upon others, who would inflict violence upon others. And this issue has been highlighted by Abolish Frontex as well. It's a huge realization, it's a huge insight when it comes to our work, when it comes to violence, which is the location of violence. It seems to be abstract, but it's the German police issue is not a German problem. It is a global problem. It is a global issue. I also talked to activists outside of Germany, Musna al-Hash, active in Sudan, in a collective in Sudan. A revolution is underway there, and when we occupied the president's palace, those who shot at us, the police who potted us, Vincent, they were trained by the federal police of Germany. That's what she told me. This shift, externalizing the EU borders, and that happens in Sudan as well. We see that happening in Sudan because on paper, police, they called it humane policing, but it was about migration control. That is the EU migration regime that is also organized and enforced by the German police force. Our campaign, we are an abolitionist campaign. We have this long-term goal to abolish police, and we have made 3 realizations. Violence is a shared experience. There is more and more support for our kind of movements, and that support for the police is waning, and the awareness that this is a global problem. The problem of the issue of violence and police violence, and that this is a social problem. The third one is that this is a social problem. City and the Senate, they're saying, well, Mercedes-Benz Arena, Amazon Tower and police station at Kotti, this is their response, right? But we want other solutions. We want an end to deportations. We want free local public transport, and we want access to affordable housing, and we want more social housing. These are our answers. So this is a social issue. Thank you.
I think it's really important that you address violence and what other types of or forms of violence it is connected to. So how is security or safety sold to us? How is it presented to us? So we are really told that we need police, we need jails to be more safe. However, the state wants to achieve security by locking individuals away, so that's the main problem. Because by doing so, they reproduce the cycle of violence. And what you do is telling us this does not provide safety. The police does not protect us. What other types of safety are there? And I think this is really important to talk about when we speak about violence. Because all that the state's doing is reproducing violence. Perfect. So I want to build a bridge to your work. Yeah, I'm Armin from CopWatch, and I want to actually add something to your introduction. CopWatch was founded after Christi Schwundek was killed in 2013. Christi Schwundek was a black woman who was shot dead in the job center in Frankfurt. So this really shows the international perspective. It's not always the spaces that we expect where people die. People can also be shot dead in spaces like the job center. So what kind of distinguishes us from you, and because I feel like you're really doing grassroots work, is that we work differently. So we have a hotline, which means that people can call us and we call them back. Mostly people that have experienced racist police violence call us, but it's also people that have witnessed this type of violence that can call us. And we're also a documentation center, meaning that we document all calls, we document all the cases that are brought to us, and we also offer an information center, meaning that we have an office where we meet with people affected by police violence, we meet with their friends, and we provide support for them, meaning that we want to engage in a dialogue with them. We don't use the term advice or counseling, because this is not what we provide, but we rather want to be a place that people can go to when they have experienced police violence and when they don't know where they should go to. So we are in contact with lawyers that have been collaborating with us. We have contacts, or we're in contact with doctors that can help people, and we try to empower them. If they want to go public, we also have we're also in contact with journalists. But our work is really based around what people that have suffered police violence want. So violence comes in different forms, and this is what we also want to highlight with our work. Although we use the term cop in our name, we don't always just refer to police violence, because cops are not the only ones who exercise or who enforce violence. Violence is also happening when people don't get their adequate treatment at the doctor. Violence is enforced by security staff. And violence can also mean that people have such a great psychological trauma that they can never heal.
Jetzt schon ganz schön lange, seit 2013 versuchen zu sagen, ja.
So this is something that we've been trying to address since 2013.
Ja, und ich finde, bei eurer Arbeit sieht man auch gut sozusagen die lange Geschichte, also sieht man bei euch allen, aber beim Cop-Watching auch.
The long history
du hast auch gesagt, das hat sich sozusagen im Nachgang zu
the fights against violence quite well. So you just said that you were founded after Christi Schwundig was killed. However, you're drawing on a lot of other moments that have happened in the past. So there is a practice of abolitionist movements, of abolitionist knowledge that you can really refer to and that we should not forget. So you don't always have to reinvent new things. You can always draw on movements and struggles that have existed before. And I just want to say this documentation center is really great and important to have. And finally, we want to talk about women in exile youth. Your group has existed for over 20 years. This is great.
I'm Sarah from Women in Exile. What Women in Exile does, I'd say it's on the first part, it's a grassroots-based organization. And this is because we go to, we visit the lagers and the camps where these women are, or where these women live, to be able to connect with them and invite them to our monthly group meetings. This is important because from there we can take the next step, or the women are able to take the next step in getting empowered. We do offer empowerment workshops, such as in terms of educational workshops, such as law and health workshops. And we also offer empowerment workshops, which are peer-to-peer based, where we were able to exchange ideas on the different problems that we may be going through at the time, and from there we're able to find solutions. Women in Exile is also a bridge which connects the women to certain services that we're not able to provide, such as lawyers that are in solidarity with refugee women, good doctors, and we also work with language schools that give scholarships to women that are not able to access these language schools. Because as we all know, there's this classification of refugees on who is supposed to get the, who is able to get the, what are they called? Who is able to get the certain services and who is not allowed to. And this is one of the things that we fight against, because when you come here, everyone is a refugee. It doesn't matter. When you seek asylum, you're seeking, your grounds are important to you, and they should not be taken lightly. And when we see this classification of refugees from which country you come from, and who should get this, who should not get this, first, what first comes to play is racism. You see it very clearly from access to society, because when you deny people something basic as language, that is something very important to our day-to-day lives. So because now when someone comes here, you're already isolated, and then because you don't know anyone here, and then now you become doubly isolated because you can't speak the language. And who are you supposed to talk to? Whatever you're going through, how are you supposed to explain yourself? How are you supposed to seek the kind of help that you would need or you would require? And we also do documentation of different problems or the struggles that the women go through from in the lagers, which can be found on our blog. When you talk about problems that the women go through, some of the problems are sexual violence within the camp and also outside the camp, because you find that these lagers are located in isolated places, where being able to access something as simple as a supermarket is you require to, for example, you can wait for a bus for more than 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 1 hour, or even 2 hours for you to be able to access the closest market. What does this mean? This means that, and you also find that where these lagers are located is highly populated with Nazis or the racists. So this also poses a danger in terms of security. And we saw this, we saw this in 2018, which unfortunately ended badly for one of our sister. Our sister Rita, she used to live in a lager in Hohenleipisch, where she was found murdered not very far from her camp, like 100 meters. And when she reported, because before she had reported this harassment to the police station, but no action was taken. And the end result was her being murdered. And up to today, we have not found, or that they have not taken action on her case. And we say, and we still fight for justice for Rita. But and also at the same time, we also demand that anyone that reports, and especially refugee and immigrant women, that when they report any sort of violence to their police, that they are taken seriously, because most of the times it ends very badly. And we also see this also in last year, when we also lost an Afghan woman because of domestic violence. Same thing. This is not only seen outside the camp, but also within the camp. When women report on sexual violence or even domestic violence to the security workers, no action is taken against the perpetrator. And also, it's taken like it's a normal thing, a normal occurrence that the woman should be okay with it, or like, yeah, it's not okay. And these are all the forms of violence that women face in their daily lives. And this is also why it's important, or why it became important for women in exile to have our campaign of no lagers for women and children, and abolish all lagers, because from our day-to-day experiences, all the violence that we face each and every day, from sexual, domestic violence, from not being able to control who's able to access your room, because even the security workers, the security personnel is able to walk into your room without no notice, do random searches, no notice. And even when you now go and report to the Heimleiter, no action is also taken. No action is taken. Violence to us also means not being able to do something simple as going to the toilet without having the feeling of fear, because you find that, again, these toilets, these bathrooms are located in places where you have to walk a while for you to be able to access them, or they're located in different floors from where you sleep. Another thing that affects a lot of women, and I find that when all of this build up, some women are not able to take it. Like, you become depressed. Some also commit suicide, and this has also become recently. It's become a common occurrence. And this is why it's very important for us not to find a similar solution to lagers, but to abolish them completely, because the lives of people that are living in these lagers matter. They should not have to come and face or become doubly traumatized, because from where they came from, they were running from something. Why should they now start running from the demons that they face every day? It does not make sense. So solutions should be, they should find solutions that work to improving the lives of these women and not traumatizing them doubly. And before I finish, I also want to touch on also the discrimination and also the racism that we face also in the health sector, because you find that, for example, when one goes to seek asylum, you're taken to the Erstaufnahme of English, I can't remember. Anyway, to the reception center. When you're taken there, you have to you undergo a health check. Maybe they find something wrong with your reproductive organs, and we found that when something like that happens, they do not take cautionary steps. They go to the extreme step of doing a hysterectomy without the woman actually knowing what exactly is happening. And this is violence towards on this woman's body. And we've also seen that it's not only because it's not only on the reproductive organs, but also on a normal operation where doctors don't really it's like you're not treated as a human being. You're not important, because they do such shoddy work. When you come out of that operation, you have more problems than what you went in with. And these are things that should also be addressed, not only in the lager system, but also in the health sector, especially for refugee and immigrant women. Yeah.
Ja, ich fand es sehr eindrücklich, dass du gesagt hast, es geht euch um access to society.
You said it was about access to society for you in your work, and that reflects a notion that I mentioned earlier, the organized abandonment, the notion that Gilmer uses. That is reflected by the forms of violence you were describing, the racist discrimination at the hands of the police, and the violence that you are exposed to in the health sector that you described, but also being excluded due to language or waiting for the bus, having to wait for the bus, having to wait for a long time. That turns into a form of violence. That is a form of violence. Thank you for laying it out for us in the way you did. And that shows us how complex and how comprehensive these forms of violence really are. Some are perpetrated at the hands of the state, sometimes partly by the hands of the state, and there are other forms of violence. So there's a whole panorama, a whole gambit of forms of violence that you address and that you fight against. My second question to you is, when we talk about violence, what is the antithesis? What is what can we do against violence? There's a long history in the left about power and counterpower, violence, and what do we do against the violence? How do we fight that violence? How do we build a countervailing force, violence against things, violence against people? When it is justifiable? When is there the possibility for nonviolent resistance? When is nonviolent resistance not possible? There's a mechanic force, something, violence that is inflicted upon us, and then there's a force that tries to fight against that violence that is inflicted on us. So the antithesis to violence could be counter power, for example. Gegengewalt in German. In some abolitionist traditions, the anti-colonial, the decolonial struggles, many refer to Fanon's notion of violence, which brings in another aspect. Because for Fanon, the counter power, the Gegengewalt, is not only of an instrumental character, use power to some end, but also or the fact that the resistance that you are engaging in turns you into a subject, and turns you into a subject with agency. You hear that, you see that in the works of Frederick Douglass as well, in the fight against enslavement. So this resistance brings about this subject that has agency. Violence seems to have a very deep effect, which is that notion of subjectivity. And I want to also bring into this discussion another notion. Vanessa and I have stressed that in the recent abolitionist discourse is another term that comes up, or that is relevant here, is the notion of care as a counter power. When we say that violence is not just explicit violence, but also is comes in the form of organized abandonment, and when you have an image of humanity that is not isolated, when you think that we are responsible to create social conditions that allow for our well-being, that then brings us to the fact that fighting against violence is not enough. We have to create the conditions for our well-being as well. So, or in other words, care, that is part of discourse around transformative justice, for example, as well. But beyond that, in the current discourse, it is about ending violence and to come up with another term, or think about solidarity, care, mutual support, or love sometimes. So there's those who stress that, say they move away, or they abandon this notion of violence, or the field of violence, that is, or that discursive dimension of violence, and move to this other dimension where we where it is about creating the conditions for our well-being. To what extent does that play a role in your work? You try to fight against violence in different ways. For you, I mean, you provide concrete support, right, to survivors. That could be described as a form of care as well. Maybe that notion of care is not central to your work, but does it play a role in your work? Do you consider this in your work? So forms of Gegengewalt, of countervailing forces, of resistance, forces against violence, of counterpower, and how do you think about that? How do you frame that from the perspective of your work and your group?
Yeah, I agree. We care. If we don't care, we will not do anything like it. Sorry. Yeah, so this is the first step, that you care. The thing touches you in some way or another, and then start thinking, what the hell can I do? And the thing, and it's kind of shocking when for me at least, when I know that as a part of society, as a part of a taxpayer, I fund this violence, at least at the borders. When I see Frontex as an agency, and this is like the main concern of the network, and I see it like the big tyrant in this border struggle, when it goes from funding in 2005 from 6 million to become a 754 million in 2022, so this is something like really terrifying. And then this much of producing violence, how can I, as individual, autonomous, or as a network group, or as a movement, how I could counter it? There's good lessons of history, because as you said, like abolitionism and abolitionist, it became from the American resistance history. And let's say that one of the effective instruments to face the racism, the American racism against the African American, was the counter racism. So if I'm black, you are white, and then like playing this kind of rule to make the one who feel the supremacy, the one who played the rule of a racist, to feel how it is. This could be something, but the second thing for me, that who fund this thing? Like who fund this shit? This is a shit. Who fund it? Who pay for it? Us. We pay for it every year from our money. And this is something that we need to discuss. Not just as a grassroots, but no, also as a voters, as a political parties, as a parliamentarian. All this much of money, this amount of money, just for one agency, when you know just one country, one member state, Germany, pay for one North African country like Egypt, weapon last year was 4.3 billion euros. This is crazy. In 2014, there was a rescue mission, Italian rescue mission at the Mediterranean called Mare Nostrum. And it was by Italian mandate, and its budget was 12 million euros a month for 1 year. So it's approximately 180 million, so like a half of Frontex budget, and it succeeded to rescue over 130,000 persons. And now at the Mediterranean, with all this money and all these funds and all this equipment, more people are dying. And this is a way of violence. So how I counter it, we will not solve violence with violence, and we will not solve violence with pure peace, like peace. Because we are saying peace for a decade and nothing happened. We are keep smiling in the face and nothing happened. And when we talk loud and when we kind of angry, another frustrated black person. So how to counter this violence? Actually, to spark the minds, to talk to the people, to put their responsibility in every one of you are responsible. This is simple. Huh? I'm not accusing anyone, but you have to be aware of it. This is a way to counter such a violence. Thank you.
Ja, bei Counter-Violence oder Gegengewalt ist mir, als ihr beide gesprochen habt, gerade irgendwie aus einem anderen Bereich in meinem Leben eine Anekdote
Gewalt or counter-violence. That just another anecdote came to mind. I was just reminded of that. I work a lot on the history of anti-racist movement in Germany, migrant self-defense and movements in Germany. We had situations where people fought with weapons against fascist regimes and other regimes, and they came to us and they told us, you are attacked by Nazis with clubs, why don't you get guns and fight back? What's the problem here? What about the revolution? You can get weapons and retreat to the mountains and fight. So this is this is part of this negotiation. The second generation of migrant community in Germany. We had to negotiate these issues. How do we respond to this very crass violence that we are experiencing? So this is a question that we've been grappling with for a long time, and that the anti-racist movements have been grappling with for a long time. And we as a movement, in our title actually, ihr seid keine Sicherheit, you do not protect us, that already tells the story basically, or shows our perspective on this. Many people are jailed every year, and they face violence because they face repression because they use local public transport without getting a ticket. We are trying to shift the narrative of safety.
Dafür sind wir zu jung, aber haben jetzt keine langjährige
So this could be a form of resistance, using local public transport for free without paying, for example. We have another practice as a group. We are of course, it's clear to us that we have to organize against power in order to actually put into practice the many demands, such as abolish Frontex. All these demands that are out there, abolish Lager. There is the demand to abolish these, get rid of this notion of kriminalitätsbelastete Orte in German. And we have to find solidarity. We have to build and forge broad alliances, organize demonstrations. We were surprised how easy that is and how quickly people supported us. The problem is nobody seems to be interested. For us, we asked the question, how do we organize counterpower and how do we put into practice, how do we enforce our calls, our demands? And now we organize in May a counter event to the European Police Conference. You know, the police forces from Europe, they convene in Berlin, and we call it the Large Anti-Police Tribunal. We want to bring together different movements in May here in Berlin to think about this together. We have the demands, we have a lot of notions and concepts that we work with, and we have a lot of support from the people. Now it is about the question, how can we actually implement our demands and put them into practice and force them?
Also ja, ich habe viele Gedanken dazu. Ich glaube, vielleicht so das allererste, was mir so eingefallen ist. So
I have many thoughts come up for me when I hear you, and also on this question, many approaches because they have experienced racist police violence. And having said that, it's not just about those who experience this kind of violence, but also those who do not experience. The signal that is conveyed to others is that this person is dangerous, but I have not committed any crime. I have not committed any offense. So, and this is implicit in many of what you said, this question of guilt. Many of us, many who come to us, they say, I have... apparently I've committed something, some offense, because otherwise this would not have happened to me. Of course you did not. That's what they're trying. That's what we're trying to tell them. And this issue of guilt is such a central issue for those who come to us.
Habe ich Schuld, sondern auch die Frage von
not only
Polizistinnen
am I guilty,
bewerten nicht, was
but
du
also
getan hast.
the fact that
dürfen das nicht bewerten.
Officers,
police
is not allowed to assess what you have done, to evaluate what you have done, to judge what you have done. They don't know what's right or wrong. They don't have any authority to do that. And this is something what we have to convey to people. So guilt is not actually, or culpability is not a question that we have to discuss in this context. But this is what we are trying to convey to people. In this context of police, we're working a lot, and it doesn't work without violence. So in response to your question, it's difficult to answer your question in that way. So we provide information. So I'm part of this community work effort. We are part of this community work effort, but it is about scandalizing what is happening. We need those survivors, and we also need those who are not affected by this kind of violence, because it's not enough to just work with the survivors. We need the support of those who are not exposed to this kind of violence as well. We organize workshops, so we do education work as well. The neighborhoods and their organizations, their associations, they approach us. They're interested in these workshops that we offer. Many young people are interested in our work, many social workers. They're telling us our youth is exposed to massive police violence and brutality. So this is about agency, Daniel, you mentioned it. People want to have agency, and maybe we contribute with our work a little bit to increasing their agency. So these are some of the thoughts that I have that are related to your question, and I hope I could respond to your question in that way.
It's a loaded question, but what Women in Exile does, we've created a safe space. As I said earlier, we normally meet once every month, and here it gives women the chance to talk about themselves, their experiences, kind of like a healing space, because once you talk about your problems, you bring them out. A problem shared is a problem solved, but also you're not left with that load to carry. You feel a little lighter. But now, in terms of how can the society also help in this cause? We normally ask the same question every time there's an election. You find that what we have been seeing on the streets is not what is reflected in the votes that are counted. And we are always wondering, where are these people that come out in large numbers to support our demonstrations every time we call for a demonstration? But then the same people turn a blind eye and vote for these people that are against us being here. Where does not make sense. It also calls into question on how much are you willing to turn a blind eye upon, because first of all, even if, I normally say, even if you don't care about me, care about, I'll say what Kashif said, care about where your money is going. Recently, we've had a lot of deportations happening. And these deportations are chartered deportations. That means that a lot of money is going towards catering for these deportations, and you're okay with that. Instead of this same money being channeled towards other things like providing proper housing for refugees, which, as we have seen in the recent times, is possible. And I say this because we have seen them. We have seen it with the refugees from Ukraine who have been given proper housing, who have been given the chance to choose where they would like to live, which we are denied, who have been given access to employment, which we are denied, who have been given access to language classes, to go back to university, which the same refugees from, Black African refugees from Ukraine were denied. And I am posing this because I don't know if you're from Germany, but if you are, I am posing it to you directly. Why are you okay with that? Because at the end of the day, my life, just like your life matters, mine does as well, and it should not, and this should not be a question that is posed on who deserves it more than the other. That should never be. That should not, in a perfect world, that should not be a question that should be asked or even considered. And now, as also when it also comes to healthcare, you find I talked earlier about the injustices that also happen in healthcare, but you also have where women, refugees are also not able to access healthcare because they do not have health insurance, or they have to wait for them to get a good shine from the social arm for them to be able to go to a hospital. Or they're also denied access to healthcare because they are not Germans. These are all things that should also come into play because these are not, it's not something that happens overnight. This is something that goes gradually. It's something that keeps growing. When you push, when you know that this is my border, and when you push a little bit and say, I'm okay with that, then you're going to push more. And they've been, and I say this because you've seen that the government has kept pushing, and the German society has kept silent, which means that they are okay if they keep pushing more. If they keep pushing more, until when is it going to be okay? Until when is the last straw going to break? What is supposed to happen? That will be my question. Because there's no solution unless the society that lives in that country or in that place takes the action themselves. We cannot do it. We are outside the society. We have been denied access. We cannot vote. We cannot we cannot work. We cannot, we cannot contribute into society. And when you try to do it, you're deported, or you're told A, B, C, D, Z on why you're not allowed to do something. But you are the ones that hold the power to change it, not me. Me, I'm only able to bring forward I'm only able to educate you on what is happening, and you are the one that's supposed to take action on my behalf. And this is why we normally say, share your privilege. Sharing privilege is very important because I don't have the privilege, but you do. And when you share it is when you're going to be able to see changes taking place. Thank you.
Vielleicht, um das ein bisschen vielleicht greifbar zu machen, was Sarah auch gesagt hat.
Thank
also
you,
auch
Sarah, for your
nochmal die
input.
Perspektive zu nehmen,
Maybe I
beispielsweise nach dem
can
Tod von George Floyd.
say
Wir
something
hatten
or
noch
comment
nie so
on
viele
it.
Anfragen wie diesen
After
Sommer.
George
Mit
Floyd
Abstand
was
noch nie.
murdered,
So,
we
und plötzlich
had
all
a
eyes
lot
were
of
on us.
requests.
So, wir wurden vom Landtag
So all eyes
eingeladen,
were
wir wurden
on
von der
us.
Expertinnenkommission
The
2.0 eingeladen.
regional
Und
parliaments
sozusagen,
invited
dann
us,
so auf diese Frage von
different
Gegenwart
institutions
zu gehen.
invited
So,
us
wir waren dann
and
beim
wanted
Landtag
to
und
know
haben da
what they could
gesprochen,
do
aber
against violence.
wozu? So, was hat
So
uns das
we
gebracht?
went
Wir
to the
haben da als
parliaments
Gruppe
and
ganz,
spoke
ganz viel
to them.
mitgenommen, weil
But
wir
I really
uns
want to
danach
ask,
ganz lange diesen Prozess
what
befunden
did we
haben
take
von,
from it?
wofür haben wir das getan? So, für wen haben wir das
That's
eigentlich
really a
getan?
question
So, das hat
that we ask
keinen
ourselves.
betroffen, hat das irgendwas gebracht, dass wir da
Because
saßen?
this
So,
did not
und
help any of
wir
the
haben
people that
sozusagen schon in unserer
suffered
mündlichen
police violence.
Stellungnahme
So we issued a
eine
public
Erfahrung von einer betroffenen
statement
Person erzählt, die,
and
das war
we
abgesprochen so, ne?
referred to the traumatic experiences of a person who experienced police violence. We presented all of that in the regional parliaments.
Kleinigkeiten.
But
wir haben
it didn't
vorhin
lead to
im
anything.
Gespräch darüber gesprochen. Ich meinte, wenn wir im Plenum 5, 6
And we also
Leute sind,
talked
dann ist das ein
about it
gutes Plenum.
earlier.
So, das sind viele Leute.
I
Also,
told you that
manche
if
Menschen
we
denken,
have
irgendwie
5 to
Gruppen
6
wie wir,
people
die hätten
participating in
total
our
viele Leute
regular
und
meetings,
wir brauchen
that's
keine Menschen, die uns
already
helfen.
a
Das
lot.
stimmt nicht. So, also ich glaube auch,
But the
sozusagen,
truth
auch wenn
is
es uns
that
schon
it's
10 Jahre
not
gibt,
enough.
so die Arbeit, die wir tun,
We have
ist
been
mit
existing
Kapazitäten
for
verbunden. Und das,
a lot of
das
years.
bedeutet
The work
auch zum
that we
Beispiel,
do
dass ihr wenig von
requires
Copwatch
capacities.
öffentlich hört, weil wir keine Zeit
So
für
this also
Öffentlichkeitsarbeit
means
haben, ne?
that you
Weil einfach die Arbeit
often
mit
do not get any
Betroffenen
news from
Zeit
us,
kostet oder
Copwatch,
Energie
because we
kostet.
simply
Also
do
ich
not have
glaube,
time to
oder
publish
einfach nur, um das
news
noch mal so
and
auf so
information.
kleinere, lokale
So maybe just
Begebenheiten auch noch mal zu
to
bringen.
show
Genau.
you what the little things are about and to talk about the little things that are actually missing. Okay, thank you for your responses. I thought it was interesting to see that there were similar motives that you all addressed. So it kind of revolved around the question, what can we do, what is needed? And I want to address this a little bit more. So violence addresses different people in different forms and in different scales. This has to do something with race, with class, with different categories, different social categories. However, resistance against violence also comes in different forms. So different groups react to violence in different ways. And all of you kind of addressed that. You started mentioning responsibility, mentioning that the majority society should also take responsibility for this racist system of violence. Then you also talked about the struggle of mobilizing and not having enough support from the majority society. So you really addressed the topic of how we can create solidarity that goes beyond those people who are affected by violence. Then you kind of directly asked, how can you be okay with this system of violence? And I think this is a crucial question. I think we could even ask the following, or say the following. It's not even just ignorance that the majority society is kind of performing. It's also being complicit in this relation of violence. I think a lot of people that belong to the majority society even experience this as a type of empowerment because they sense that it's a really powerful position that they are in. So I think right now we have to acknowledge that the society is divided, and we should really ask ourselves, how can we overcome this division and create more solidarity?
I have here a really question that I was keeping asking myself and asking people around, and even I was asking politicians wherever I meet, like, why all this money we spend on the violence practice wherever we are, instead of investing on the people themselves? Like when we talk about a crucial problems like racism, like violence, again, like this xenophobia. And thank you that you mentioned the majority of society feeling powerful, because actually this violence kind of representing them. They are happy with it. They feel kind of defended. So why all this amount again? Like, why this amount of money like we are spending on this violence, on these troops, on these deportations, and we are not investing this money on the people? And by the way, by mentioning the Ukraine crisis, they are not in a better situation because they are going through a filtration process. So they are not refugee or are not asylum seekers. They are something in between. So you have access to learn the language. If you are good and prove that you are integrated and you can access the market and go to work and to be kind of beneficial, we will renew your residence because you only have 2. If not, you know what? War ends every day. The war ended in Yemen, in Libya, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, wherever there is no war. And there will be no war in Ukraine after 2 years, even if there is still bombing. And this is politics. So what the Ukrainian people going through, it's a filtration. Same happened with Syrians. And after 3 years, we start here that Syria is safe. And asking people will not, like the Syrian that not well integrated in the German society, to go back home. So this all migration management policies and politics is really driving me crazy. Huh? Like, come on, people already here. There is like, what? It's a paper, huh? I have the paper. What the difference between me when I have a paper and someone maybe better than me and educated better than me, but have no paper? Regulate this. This is the thing. This is actually one thing that we need to do. First thing, collaboration to connect all together, all these resistance movements, and to call for regulation. Regulate this. And integration really exploded by politicians and media. Integration goes both ways, not just one way. But this is something that we need to discuss and talk about. Like, why? Just answer why. Thank you.
Ja. Ich will vielleicht auch noch einen Punkt hinzufügen. Ich bin mir gerade unsicher, ob ich den so gut auf den Punkt bringen kann, aber vielleicht stelle ich mich selbst mal ein bisschen in Frage. Dass es niemanden interessiert, stimmt ja nicht. Du hast
However,
ja auch die
I want to say it's not true that nobody cares about these things. You mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement. There were hundreds of thousands of people who went to the streets. I also don't know if it's just about empowerment. Sometimes I think of a fact that is kind of complex. So anti-racism has experienced anti-racist movements have experienced increasement during the time of Black Lives Matter. So I received a lot of messages. There was a lot of attention that was given to anti-racist struggles and movements.
Anti-Rassismus war irgendwie hip, aber die Frage war für
I kind of felt like anti-racism was a trend,
auch immer, welche
but those who have
und wie werden auch
been engaged in anti-racist struggles for a long time had the impression that different types of anti-racist struggles are pitted against each other. So I grew up in Berlin, for example. I've been part of these struggles for a long time. And then we could see that a lot of organizations received a lot of donations, etc. But then we could see that there were certain anti-racist groups that received no support, no funding, no donations at all. one thing that I will never forget is the following. I was invited to a meeting in the parliament, and the ESD Initiative of Black People in Germany has tried to address the problem of the exploitation of agricultural workers in Germany for a long time. So they have highlighted that they are being exploited, that the employers take away their identity documents, their passports. And I will never forget that there was a politician from the CDU who told me, Mr. Babutilabu, we just simply have a different opinion on this topic. But if you want to offer a workshop on white supremacy for our police units, we're happy to invite you. So I feel like people are trying to capitalize on and buy anti-racism.
Entlang von solcher Fragen, welcher Antirassismus wird hier gemacht? Ne?
This is something that I want us to talk about. And this is something that I think about a lot.
Wo ich so keine wirkliche Lösung oder kein was für
certain aspects are being
Warum ist es so die auch nur letzte Nachricht von Leuten, die sagen, ich fühle mich so und so weiter, so unfassbar interessant für so eine liberale Öffentlichkeit. Aber 25.000 Menschen, die seit 2015 an EU-Außengrenzen gestorben sind,
why people are only interested in one aspect of anti-racism or racism.
Antirassismus
so there are a lot of books where that kind of gives recommendations for people on how to be anti-racist, and then they say something like, buy from this black platform. But then at the other, on the other side, the country or the federal country is planning to build a deportation center near the airport in Berlin. So these two things kind of contradict each other, and I can't explain it to myself from a psychological perspective how people can actually bring these two things together and how they can kind of live with these two very opposing aspects.
Also wenn jetzt von euch niemand dringend was dazu sagen will, würde ich jetzt
All right, so if you don't want to comment on it, I would like to open the discussion and take questions, comments, objections from the audience. You can also ask the groups about their work. You can share your perspectives. Feel free.
Meldest du dich? Ja. Es gibt ein Mikro. Ihr müsst ins Mikro sprechen, damit die Übersetzerinnen das
hören. Please make sure to use the mic. Thank you.
I'm a part of the refugee movement here in Berlin, and also part of the anti-racist movement. Yes, exactly. I want to say that where all this money goes, I also where all this money actually coming from. This is the question, or not even where it goes, because when it comes on us as refugee, whenever we ask for whatever like housing or education or whatever, of course the money is not there. But exactly, we wanted to mention the deportation prison, which is going to be built in Brandenburg, in Schönefelde, which also definitely, again, risking a lot of deportations already happening, like massive deportation, but now you have also like a deportation center, which means if you don't even get the permission to stay here, you are getting into prison, again, isolation. And also what happening with your life is as a refugee is that you go through all of this trauma, war, and what happens to you on the way, which is not only running away from police, you have to also run away from whatever kind of people because of human trafficking and so on that even people or no human rights organization even talk about. But there are so many cases. And I want to say that it's so sad that at the moment we as activists or in general people in Berlin or in Germany are so ignorant because what is happening at the moment, war everywhere. The only place where you see super much ignorant is Germany, and only in Germany, like where all the problems also rooting and even producing most of the problems of the world. So I just wanted to actually mention this, that we are at the moment trying to protest against this deportation center, and would be amazing. Of course, Sophia also want to add some more, but would be amazing if we get more support from all groups and also from all the initiatives that they are out there to be a part of it.
Ja. Ja, vielen Dank. Super wichtige Intervention auf jeden Fall. Achso.
Yeah, thank you for your.
All of it, but
thank you for sharing that.
To make these links between police and prison abolition and policing and the deportation regime that is happening and the deportation center that's being built. The campaign is currently mobilizing, so you're very welcome to tag on, and we're on social media at Abschiebezentrum B, verhindern. I think you've said it all, Silti. But yeah, thanks.
Ja, vielen Dank. Gibt es andere Kommentare, Fragen? Es kann nicht sein, dass es alles unkontrovers ist.
Remarks, comments, questions?
Yeah.
It would be quite disappointing if you think we are so uncontroversial.
Ich wollte mich also erstmal ganz herzlich bei Ihnen bedanken.
Thank you, first of all.
Und ich will jetzt keine Befindlichkeiten äußern, aber ich muss mal wieder einsehen, was auch gut und wichtig ist, dass ich etliches von dem, was Sie erzählt
haben, it's good and important that
Arbeit,
much of what you shared about your work, I was not aware of that. These are cases, these are structures that are in place, that are existing on different levels.
Die mir so nicht klar waren.
Certain policing practices, police practices, and different levels up to Frontex as well. So thank you for sharing all this. My background is in art history. I just wrote an article about a performance, and I don't want to talk about art now, but let me just say that there was a performance in Hamburg, a site-specific performance, and I wrote an article about this. And the performance addressed an abolitionism with people from groups fighting against police violence, together with people who have a refugee experience and who are survivors of police violence. They worked together with them. They worked with sex workers, with
Da gibt es ja dann häufig im Kunstbereich die Gefahr, dass es so ein bisschen preaching to the
people with migration history, and there's often the accusation that this could be a form of preaching to the choir, but I saw the potential for a debate. The participants or the attendants, those watching the performance, attending the performance, was maybe part of the bourgeoisie, but the performers, there was a moment where there was some interaction between the audience and the performance. And the police at Hansaplatz, which has been criminalized, a location that has been criminalized. And this was actually an art strategy, an artist strategy that was quite impressive, because they were able to reduce the number of police at the Hansaplatz as part of the performance. So that was quite an interesting performance. An artistic intervention that created change, that was able to create change, an installation performance. So people in one location were able to protest the arrests that took place at the Hansaplatz.
Ja, vielen Dank.
I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you. Would you like to respond to that?
Also ich glaube, es ist auf jeden Fall gut darauf hinzuweisen, dass
I think it's important to point out that you all have great websites. So if you're looking for more information, please go check out these websites. It's not just a question of ignorance or who is actually interested, or not even a question of knowledge. Much of the information that is not part of the media discourse, the mainstream media discourse. This is something that has been pointed out by grassroots organizations and that is also addressed by them. And this is also about how seriously do we take certain media outlets. The link between violence that we talk about and the media, who offer a certain frame for interpretation and perpetuate that frame.
Art is a good instrument actually to denounce what's going on and also to show it to the people that they don't know. A couple of weeks ago, I attended here a performance called Invisible Game, in German Keine Grenze, and K is between quotations, so you can write it also K, eine Grenze. And there was also like this bourgeoisie class people attending this in Heimathafen here in Berlin, and some of them were kind of shocked of the practice happening at the borders, and it was really nice to get the people engaged and ask questions and try to educate themselves about the situation. For sure, art is good, but the thing that here we were talking about the capacity. We are not superhuman beings. We are normal human beings, have a kind of a limited capacity in the end. And it would be really nice if there is artists and art schools that are interested to take up a book or a study research or a report somewhere or a documentary and turn it up in an art piece that discusses the situation, because really it matters to connect, again. This is the for me, this is the password. This is the magic word to reach something, to connect the struggles even. Like the struggles against the police, against the board, because in the end it's all it's a mentality, yeah? It's a kind, not a military, but in the end it's a security mentality that is controlling and rolling even the politician. The politician, after what happened in America and was Black Lives Matter, they were like, okay, let's discuss what's going on here. Also, we have problem here and we need to discuss it. And what, after a year? Really nothing, because political, they just change the agenda. Like the agenda is just changed. Flip the paper. Where is the benefits? There is no benefits. Oh, it's a headache. Okay. There is a search and rescue movement and they need funds. Give them 8 million for 4 years, like 2 million a year, and it's enough for them, and we will see. And then instead of talking about actions from the government, talking how to spend this money and what will you do with it. And this is kind of the game that they are keeping the left and the resistance movement in it. And by the way, legally, if you resist a law enforcement, it's a violation. This is a law violation if you resist. So we are just trying to resist.
Noch mehr Fragen, oder? Ja.
Is it on? Yes, it is. Sorry.
More questions.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for this important event. I really enjoyed listening to all of your voices. I think one of the last questions that really resonated with me, and I think I have been thinking about it for a while, and I have not yet found an answer for myself. By the way, in context, I'm also like a part of different activist groups within Berlin, is how we can protect ourselves from the commodification of anti-racist fights, because I'm seeing this in on different levels, in different spaces happening, like a smaller space within my university, for example, where we have been advocating for a critical diversity policy, and basically have been giving the Hochschulleitung, the presidents and so on, critical whiteness workshops for free for a whole year, and the end results are that now they have the vocabulary to talk about these topics and pretend they know, or maybe, I mean they know, pretend they are on our sides, and we kind of even gave them tools to fight against us, and it's really fucking me up, to be honest, which now I'm at the point where I'm just out, and I'm really ready to not be in these spaces anymore, but I also think it's super important that these fights are being fought at. So yeah, I think it was on different points this evening raised this question, and I think it's a super important, valid one. So thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank. Möchte dazu jemand was sagen? Ich meine, ich finde auch, dass es jetzt mehrfach aufgekommen ist, die Frage von, und das ist im Abolitionismus ja von vornherein immer schon ein Thema, auch mit einer Kritik an, oder einer großen Skepsis gegenüber Reform.
It has been mentioned before. Abolitionism is critical and has a certain skepticism vis-à-vis reform. And to link this with radical critique, commodification is a practice that makes it easier for people to use certain movements and certain struggles. Then there's the strategy of including certain movements into the market and into state or semi-state or partially state institutions to make them to render them harmless. And that can lead to the movements isolating themselves and losing some of their efficacy and agency. But maybe you would like to respond to the question as well.
What we do in Women in Exile.
Nun?
The name is Women in Exile and Friends. The Friends are women or people that identify as women but don't necessarily have a refugee or the immigrant background. And they are welcome to join our group, but the question that we normally pose to them is, what is your agenda? Because everyone has an agenda, but what is yours, and does it align with ours? Can we work together? That is where, where the crux lies. Because now, when you invite everyone in, this is your safe space. Now when people come and take over, it's already changed. You, the owner of that safe space, you're not welcome there anymore. So we try to control as much as you can with this, and so far it's worked. Yeah. That's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Und ich glaube auch so ein bisschen, auch wenn diese Antwort oft kommt, ist halt immer noch Vernetzung. Also ich glaube, es ist leider einfach so,
You've probably heard this answer before, but it's about networking. Many are leading those struggles, But there's a lot of knowledge already, because they have been many in the past who had the same struggles, who were engaged in the same struggles, including academia. We have published articles and books even. So there's a lot of material out there, there are a lot of possibilities out there, and if you do not start networking with others, then you remain trapped in the situation where, and you end up in a situation that you describe. You provided care work, basically, and that was then co-opted, that was commodified in the way you described. And so it begins with these very small steps, and so if you offer workshops, for example, they should not be for free. You should charge for that, because this is then later extended onto another level, this kind of practice.
Check. Von mir nur noch als letztes, was mir persönlich immer irgendwie hilft.
What is personally very helpful for me when I am afraid of isolation, for example, or that I see the threat of isolation and alienation in Western societies, that is a huge problem when it comes to activism, especially when you work on alternatives and you look for alternatives to policing and to police. It always helps me to look back, what have others done? In the 90s, there was migrant self-defense movements, for example. There was a project that I did on left African people who were active in the 1920s in Berlin. And that gave me a huge push. What were the demands? 8-hour working day, protection against repression at the hands of the military and the police. They had another demand. Unemployed should not be forced to pay rent or to pay taxes any longer. So this movement stands on the shoulders of other movements, and in terms of organizing, so it's really useful to look back what has been done before by the movements. And so networking, to build solidarity, to fight also against this deportation center and the jail sentences that are handed out.
Ich sehe eine Wortmeldung, sehe ich noch und zwei.
I see another show of hands down there. I don't know who was first.
Okay, ganz kurz, ich habe leider
just briefly.
The difficult question, because or like
back to the issue of police.
To know what you think. So. We are told that the police is there to protect us from harm, right? And the whole evening you have been talking about how are you attacked actually by it. And I think it's interesting that you talk a lot about poverty, like actually class. You talk a lot about race and migration, and then this unterlassene Hilfeleistung, this abandonment, right? But then one is asking itself, like, why wem schützt die Polizei? Like, was schützt die Polizei? What does actually police protect then? And is maybe police there to protect some other people than you or us? Or and what is also the alternative? Because the abolitionist tradition has had alternatives. Because otherwise people say yes, and then we were all going to box each other out if there is not a police to protect. So yes, what does the police protect?
Ja. Vielleicht so zur ersten Frage. Natürlich beschützt die Polizei das System, was sie
I want to comment on the first question. Of course, the police is protecting the system that they want to uphold. They want to uphold this exploitative system that we're currently living in, a system where only a few people have access to money, to housing, to
das will sie auch. Und
a lot of things.
Aus dem Grund ist sie auch entstanden. Und ich glaube, was ja zum Beispiel
And I think this is also the very reason why police was created. And this is also what Daniel writes in his text a lot. The police is a quite recent institution, or let's say an institution that was founded recently. So we don't need to provide the perfect solution to this violent system. But we can refer to older answers or counter strategies.
Ich wollte mich die Frage drücken. Nein, Spaß. Aber ja, ich finde, das ist schon.
Okay, I actually didn't want to answer this question, but I can try to. Yes, I think we have to take this question seriously, especially when you talk to residents of a city district. A lot of people say, well, I think it's good to have police here because my daughter goes to school at 8 in the morning and I'm really scared that she might experience danger or violence on the street. So a lot of residents actually approve of the police and their structure. However, what I always or repeatedly say is we need to ask ourselves what really creates security for us. There's a really nice method, you know, this game I Pack My Bag, where people just say or mention their ideas, and then I ask those people what are the things that create safety. So the children tend to answer my sister, my mother, my brother. I asked them this question in a lot of workshops, and never once did they mention police. So I think this is interesting.
I think another question that we should ask ourselves is who checks the police when they step out of line? Because you've seen, yes, there are structures put in place, but they actually work. Because if they worked, then the case of like abolishing, for example, the police would not, maybe that would not be the question, but would be another question. But now they step out of line. When we go further to seek for justice, it does not work. Then who is going to help us out? Because both the police and the judiciary don't work for us, because now it's not only the problem of the police, but also the problem of the judiciary. And again, when you go further than that, like the whole state or the whole government, who checks who? Yeah.
Last thing on this question. We have to make the distinguish between safety and security. So police exist for keeping the security for the society as we as society agreed on, but they don't bring safety. I know people, innocent people, good people in any moral, any behavior, and they don't feel safe when there's a police around. Zero safety. Because of the experience that they faced, or because what they witnessed. And we don't need to go like to talk about the racial profiling and stopping people because of their color, or how they walk, how they talk, because that's what they are doing. So if we want to discuss this as, and I'm not talking here about just the like the German police, or I'm talking about the police as an institute. In Egypt, for example, the revolution happened because of the police, because of their practice, because there is no control over them, there is no authority to judge them or even to nothing. Like there is nothing can stop them when you have this kind of authority. When a person have kind of a weapon and have a legal authority to do whatever, don't ask me. Even what we witness here in Germany, people burned to death, but there is no one can take the responsibility of that. And this is this is the police. We need to discuss what the aim, because the aim is like in a utopian world, the aim is very good. But we need to discuss the practice, the systematic violence happening, and also the mentality of them. Like they offer to do a workshop on the critical whiteness and the white supremacy. Ah, okay, nice. And then what? Nothing changed. You can ask actually the police officers of color inside the police itself of the racism behavior that they face. And then we can discuss about if the police racism, anti-racism, it's beneficial for the society, if they are bringing security and safety for everyone, or just for the system and the people who got benefits over it.
Ich finde aber in Antwort auf die Frage, wen schützt eigentlich die Polizei, auch immer wichtig.
When I try to answer the question, who does the police protect, I think it's important to talk about different strategies of policing. You've mentioned that a lot of people are affected by racial profiling and that a lot of people kind of feel guilty and feel like they have to decriminalize themselves. They ask themselves, am I guilty? Did I do something? So this violence does not only translate into physical, explicit violence, but it also has a psychological effect. And if we take this matter seriously, we can see that violence does not only have an effect on the individual, but also on the whole society. So, if I walk through Central Station in Frankfurt and I see almost every day that people are being racially profiled, and when I see that it's always the same type of people who are being racially profiled, I kind of internalize who or how the people look like that are being profiled, that are being targeted by the police. So I think this is central to policing. You, as part of the majority of society, kind of identify with the perspective of the police. And this is also something that they try to uphold, meaning the police protects the system, but it also protects my identity because they never profile or target me, but always people that are categorized as different.
Aber es gab noch eine Frage.
And I want to take on the next question. I want to take the next question.
Ja, ich habe tatsächlich so ein bisschen die Frage.
My question is about the following. How much can we achieve within this capitalist system? So, based on the fact that capitalism is all about exploitation of people. And you have mentioned all of your struggles. All these struggles take place at the same time. However, I want to know, how can we address these basic conditions that pave the way for this violence and racist system? How can we create a system where we can live in solidarity?
Wer möchte was zum Kapitalismus sagen?
Okay, who wants to say something about capitalism?
Anyone?
Anyone?
We live in actually the capitalism is there since long time, and we are living like all the catastrophe happening. Even the climate crisis, this is one of the results and impact of the capitalist system. And to be honest, yeah, this is the source of all problems, the system, how we can change the system, and to recognize at the same time our position within this system. So it's kind of complex and complicated how how can we abolish this system and build actually another thing. But it's a big question, because actually I had to be involved in this kind of workshop to think about our society, or like what the society that you want to live after 20 years. And for sure, first thing came to my mind, I wanted not to face the same struggles, not to be in this position. I'm not a utopic person. And the first thing to understand our position, it's really hard, huh? And it needs something like very crucial to start think from the scratch. Because, yeah, anyway, if not us, like this generation or the next generation, Mother Earth will not stay silent. We all see how the climate is this kind of screaming, trying to make us aware that there's something really big will happen. What we see, like the floods in Europe, how the weather changed, and what going on in Pakistan. Like really, we need to go faster, huh? To proceed further with this, and this is also like this capital system put us all, what I am imagine, and I'm sorry that I'm taking a lot of time speaking, but it's putting all on a chain in different levels and different positions, and we just run within this chain. It's to change such a system. We need a revolution. And revolution, not at demonstrations in the street. Revolution is not protest in the street. Revolution is to revolt against yourself, your behavior, your practice. Try to change the shit that we are living. So people thought about, okay, let's boycott the elections. Maybe this is a way, but with time, my opinion, no, it's not a way. There is something else. We need kind of a, like some brand new thing. We need to shock the majority to let them feel, hey, this is kind of threatening us all. No different between white and black here. There is something, well, big disaster. Like the disaster will make the change.
So?
Ja, sehr gute Frage. Meine erste
thank you for that question. Who does the police protect? My first intuition or answer was the state and capital, of course. But something that I find kind of interesting about Germany and also about the former GDR is the following.
Aber was ich da spannend finde, ist, für mich
I think it's interesting.
Relativ neu in dieser ganzen abolitionistischen
I've been new to this abolitionist perspective,
für mich antikapitalistische
and I have it really clear that we need to smash capitalism if we want to create a new system. However,
diese zentrale geteilte Erfahrung,
these shared experiences of being exposed to police violence actually comprises a lot of more things, and I think this is crucial about abolitionist movements, that they are intersectional. Another thing I want to mention is racism within the former GDR. So racism was experienced in another way in the former GDR than it was in Western Germany.
Außenpolitisch war da schon was anderes, aber wenn man so innerhalb von der DDR-Gesellschaft schaut,
if you took a look
wurden schon ganz klar
at the
Grenzen
former
gezogen,
GDR,
ne?
you can
Also
really see
VertragsarbeiterInnen
different
außerhalb der Städte, auch für eine gewisse
categories. You had
Lagerpolitik,
the
wurde sehr
so-called guest
repressiv damit
workers
umgegangen.
that were
Eine Vermischung wurde
isolated in the
sanktioniert, weiße
suburbs.
Frauen, die was mit AfrikanerInnen hatten,
There were
galten als asoziale
sanctions
Subjekte,
on
und wurden
different kinds of
teilweise
people, so
Stasi-Akten
white
eingezogen.
women
Also dieses
who
Polizieren hat auch da so
were
stattgefunden.
living together or who had a partnership with a black man were framed as antisocial. So I feel like
Also
there were always winners and losers. But the point I try to get across is that it's really worth it reading abolitionist theories. I can also recommend Daniel's book.
Ja, für mich diese abolitionistische Perspektive
because this abolitionist perspective is really profound and it really deals with liberation in from different perspectives.
Okay, wir sind schon sehr weit fortgeschritten in der Zeit. Ich glaube, habe ich eine Meldung übersehen. Ja,
Anyone else? All right, there's another hand up there. Let's take your question or a comment and then we will slowly wrap up. I wanted to also draw your attention back to what Sarah said in her last statement. What can we do to fight against police violence? I just wanted to point out, since June 2020, there's a law, the LADG, a new Berlin-wide anti-discrimination act that protects people when they are subjected to violence such as racism, intersectional discrimination, who protects those affected by that violence in public institutions.
Aber auch natürlich darauf hinweisen, dass die Praxis auch zeigt, dass das Gesetz noch sehr in den
Anfängen ist. Das ist total at the hands of police.
Gesetz vor Gericht
durchzubekommen,
weil wir immer noch ein sehr rassistisches Justiz haben.
It's difficult to implement because we have a racist justice system. I just wanted to point out, for those living in Berlin, you are covered by this law, by this act, which is really important. And civil society over the past years, who was engaged in anti-discrimination work, they have worked to make this act a reality. Would you like to? Do you have final remarks?
Final thing, yeah, here, just to end talking. Actually, the people who suffer and the people who are going through this violence and suffer from this violence, and this, not just the violence at the borders or the police violence, but the system violence, this capital violence, they will make the change. And finally, we see a kind of a campaign from refugees in Libya. So we have in Libya refugees there, voiceless. Finally, they found their way out to scream to EU and to the member states and say, this is enough. And to UNHCR, because UNHCR, like a police, it's the agency meant to protect refugees, but instead now they are protecting the border regime. So people are mobilizing and organizing a demo in front of the headquarters of UNHCR in Geneva itself. So this is something really optimistic, that people from Libya, they are isolated, detained, and chained with the slavery. Literally slavery, not modern slavery, the classical one in Libya, and they succeed to raise their voices and to deliver it to here, just to make the world listen. And this is something optimistic, and that's what I believe. The people will change what's going on. Thank you.
Maybe just really short, listen to activists, and it's okay, don't worry. Listen to activists and also listen to victims, of course, and also support us financially, because lawyers are really expensive in Germany. So people like us, groups like us, we need the money to pay for lawyers. So things like this, it's great, you know, like the money I get, it's not for me, it's for the group. So invite us to events and yeah, give us money.
Yeah, my last thing would be, warum eigentlich Englisch? Meine letzte Sache wäre, schreibt euch den 5. bis 8. Mai 2023 in den Kalender. Da
5th to 8th of May 2023, this is when we organize the tribunal.
Die hier saßen, wieder treffen.
And some of us who are here tonight will also be at that tribunal. So please join us for the tribunal.
Share your privilege. And also, we wrote a book, and you're all welcome to read it. Order it from our blog. Yes, that was all.
Ja, herzlichen Dank. Ich will noch kurz die Gelegenheit nutzen, den beiden Übersetzerinnen zu danken.
Thank you.
Das ist eine unfassbar schwere und harte Arbeit.
Thank you to all of you, and thanks to our interpreters as well.
Aber natürlich auch, ja, vielen Dank an euch alle, dass ihr.
And once again, thank you to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining this discussion.
Wichtige Arbeit, die ihr macht und auch.
Thank you for your remarkable and hard work that is often frustrating, but often also empowering work that brings us a lot of joy. So I know that we will continue this conversation and this discussion, and we will intensify it, and hopefully more people will join us so that we can bring about what you said, that the people who are suffering this violence, they can also fight it and overcome it. Thank you, and have a good evening.